Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to my talk, Doodling on the Margins, How Embracing Imperfection Can Make You a Better Game Dev. This talk is basically about myself a little bit. I doodle, draw, sketch a lot, and I was able to kind of like turn that into a career, which is weird, so I'd like to talk about that with you. So a little bit about myself, just so you don't know I'm not just like a crazy guy that sketches all over. I started working in 2014 as a graphic artist at Miniclip, and I worked for 8-Ball Pool, Agar.io, Soccer Stars, stuff like that. I started like a marketing artist and then slowly working more and more towards the games. Then in 2015, I moved from Portugal to Berlin to work at King, and I worked on like almost all the Candy Crushes. I don't know how many there are now, but a few of them have my art in it, except I think Soda. But yeah, I've worked in all the Candy Crushes almost. And then I moved as an art lead again in Berlin. I worked at Wargaming. Then I worked in hyper casual at Voodoo. And then I did some startup stuff. I worked at a company called Pink Frog, which was trying to do like TikTok with games. And yeah, and then after that, it was still the pandemic, and I was lucky enough to go back to Portugal, and I found a job at this place called Dazzle Rocks, and it was based in Helsinki, but I was working fully remote, which was like what I preferred, because I just had a kid at the time, and I was very glad to go back home. And then last year, I was contacted by DECA Games, and I was hired as the art manager, so like I do everything related to art in the company, and I've gotten to work in some really cool games, like Realm of the Mad God, Tomb Raider, and the latest ones, Star Trek Online and Neverwinter Online, which is really cool for me and perfect for the company also. So, about myself outside of work, right? I'm an art manager, I'm an art director. I do a lot of comics and illustrations, so I'm a super busy person. I think all of us are. I think all of us think of us as like we are very, very busy. But I'm also a dad, so that's like twice as busy as people that are not dads or moms, I think. And like I also do like stuff in my free time. This is kind of like the only random thing I could find about my life that was like, you see how busy I am. And you know, the one thing that keeps me going through all this time since I was a kid is like doodling. This is something that I've done my whole life. I don't really know why, but I like it a lot, and I'm gonna try to make you all do this also by the end of the presentation. I'm hoping that you have some sort of hobby like this for yourselves. So, doodling. If you are really busy, and especially if you don't have money, like I didn't for a long time, it's super cheap. $150, you can get like a notebook anywhere, and 50 cents, you can get like a pen, right? And if you work in an office, these are like free, so even better, right? You don't need to pay for them. And yeah, you can do this anywhere. I was just like drawing yesterday, coming here by plane. I can do it on the subway. I can do it like here in the hall while I was waiting for my talk. And if you have like an hour a day or whatever, you can do a full page of just like doodles, right? And it feels really good, at least it does for me. So through this whole thing, I tried to distill 3 basic, I would call it lessons, that I'm trying to pass over to you guys that can be applied to game development, but also other parts in life. But for this talking specifically, let's think about game development only. So the first one, make time for mindless creativity. Second one, perfection is overrated. And the third one is find your shorthand. These don't make sense like this, but I'll go through one by one and explain to you what I mean and how they relate to doodling. So mindless creativity. This is a blank page, and it's one of my worst enemies. It's been since I was a kid, and I think it's for a lot of people. Whether you're like a writer, an artist, whatever, you're looking at the blank page, and your idea, and I think the idea for a lot of people looking at that pen and that paper is like, okay, I need to come up with an idea in my brain. That idea is going to go through my arm, and I'm going to translate it from my brain to my arm, to my pen, to my notebook, and it has to come out perfect. And I think that's the worst type of thing that you can do to yourself. So that's why I have another sketchbook where I do that, but that's the worst sketchbook. And doodling, it's completely different. It's about exploring ideas. So basically what I do with doodling and about mindless creativity in general is you just do a line, right? And you look at the line and you're like, okay, what can this be? And then it's like, oh, cool, it's a dog. And you didn't think you were going to draw a dog, but it just kind of led you there. Same thing for like, circle. You're like, oh, cool, circle, what can I do? It can be a car. And if you have a triangle, it can be whatever this bird is. So if you're not an artist, and I try to explain this to you, I try to go more and more abstract as it goes along so that people kind of understand this idea of like exploring your mind without having to be too inside your mind, basically. The first example I use is drawing on the sand. You know the waves are going to come crashing it, so you're like just drawing whatever you want because you know it's not doesn't matter. So you get to be creative without having to worry too much about it. The second example, if we get more abstract even, is looking at clouds. And this is where I think everybody can kind of understand being in the flow, where you're just looking at clouds, and your brain is making the connections, but you're not doing them willingly. It's just like, that looks like a dog. Why? You don't know why. It kind of does. That's your brain doing the work for you. And then, if you go even more abstract, you have like shower thoughts, right? You're in the shower, and it's like your brain is too busy, like washing your hair or whatever, and the other part of your brain somehow figures out, yeah, I'll take a minute to think about that because it's really deep. And like your brain kind of takes over, shuts down the busy part of your brain, the serious part of your brain, and your unconscious starts working overtime, right? And that's where I think you find yourself in the zone and being really creative. The Buddhists call this taming the monkey mind, because like the monkey mind is the mind that's like always talking and always like in your head. And they use meditation to kind of like get away from it and try to reach nirvana. And my second grade teacher called it like, let him draw little alien dudes because he won't shut up during class. And that's been one of my problems since I was a kid, so like, it works really well. I would draw the whole class. I could actually listen to the class while not disturbing anyone, and it worked perfectly. So, translating this to the gaming industry. And I know we've all seen the same examples in the talk in the morning, but I did not know that Fozzie was going to use the exact same examples as I did. So that's just a good creative thing of like, hey, creativity can be done the same way by two people. Yeah, exactly what happened here. Kita Takahashi. I actually have the same example, different story. I don't know who's right, me or Fozzie, but we can call Kita Takahashi eventually and figure it out. I read that he was a sculptor. That's his background. He was not making games. He had a degree in sculpting. And while he was sculpting with clay, he would have like little pieces of clay everywhere on his table. And at the end, he would take like one big lump of clay and kind of like go over it and pick up all the pieces. And that's how he came up with Katamari. Fozzie says it differently. I don't believe it. I think I'm correct. And another example, and again, this is exactly like Fozzie, but different example also. Miyamoto, he said that one time, he does this a lot, he's just like in the garden, looking at stuff, kind of like looking at clouds, looking at rocks, whatever, trying to see what comes out. And he was examining like ants, and the ants were just carrying on along and taking leaves and food and stuff like this. And in his mind, he was like, cool. What if I could like take ants and make them do my bidding, right? Like, hey, ant, you do this, you do this. And that's how he came up with Pikmin. And again, like Fozzie said in the morning, to a lesser extent of like this creative flow, but still the same. He came up with Zelda by just trying to evoke this feeling that he had as a child of like growing around nature and trying to find little places that had magic in them. So like exploring nature. And that's how he came up with Zelda. And then more like this, examples, I have a few others. Matt Nava, he likes scuba diving a lot, and that's how he created Abzu, just by like exploring the depths and thinking that, cool, this could be a game. The same thing for Satoshi Tajiri. He was a big bug collector as a kid, and that's how he came up with Pokemon, like, hey, what if we could trade bugs, collect bugs, fight bugs, like we did when I was a kid, and Pokemon came out. And the last one would be Hobby and Vemba. This game, I think, came out last year, and it's about cooking, and his whole inspiration for the game came from cooking with his mom and his dad when he was a kid. And again, it's these little actions that you do that keep your mind occupied, that put your brain into this type of flow that lets you just be creative without even thinking you're being creative, and takes all of that anxiety away from you. This is something that we try to replicate a lot in the industry, right, with brainstorms. I don't know if you've ever been in a brainstorm, but I think it falls into the exact same spot that I told you about in the beginning with the pen and the paper, which is like, cool, we have a big whiteboard. Now everybody sit around and come up with ideas that are gonna either save the company or save the game or whatever. It's possible to make it like explorative and creative, but you really need people that are willing to do that. And in my experience in like 10 years, it's hard to find that group of people to go into a meeting room and be like, okay, let's really be super exposed and insecure and let everybody know what I'm thinking. It's very, very hard. So that's why I'm always advocating for stuff like more game jams or art jams, where people just get together and really explore ideas, because there's a time constraint and you're not expected to come out of those with like perfect ideas that are ready for market, right? So people really get to be creative and get to explore their minds without having to achieve perfection, basically. So that's my first lesson about creativity and how to be mindless creative. So I would tell you guys, find a hobby that you can just do without thinking too much about it, and it will help you a lot in having new ideas, better ideas, I feel. Some ideas are going to be not good at all. They're not going to be great, and that's fine, because that's my second lesson, which is perfection is overrated. So again, another story about me. I don't know how you guys are, but as an artist, I've always struggled a lot with like being inadequate, right? Feeling that I'm not good enough, that I should be better at everything that I'm not. And I don't know where it comes from, but the first time I remember feeling it was by playing this game. So I don't know how old most of you guys are, but this was like a really big game when I was a kid. It was for the Nintendo, and it's called World Cup, Nintendo World Cup. And I have an older brother. And when I played with him, he was really, really good. Like, I couldn't score a goal, I couldn't defend a goal, I couldn't even do simple things, right? And when I thought about it, when I remember as a kid, the feeling was like, why is my brother so good, and why am I so bad, and why can't I play this game, and I can't do anything right, and my brother is perfect, and I'm not. Now that I'm older, I see that I was like really, really tiny, and I couldn't really even play correctly, so it doesn't make any sense that I felt like it, but that's how I feel I still am now, and I'll only figure that out later. I still feel now that I'm not perfect, and later I'll be like, of course you're not, because you're still growing. But anyway, if you guys have older brothers, you kind of know how it feels to have older brothers. It feels like they are perfect, always. Of course they are, especially when you're a kid, because their brain is developed and yours isn't. But I was always trying to find something that I could be better than my brother at. And I found drawing, right? Again, I was like in the first grade or something, and a kid from school brought his cousin, and his cousin was like, in my mind, like 35, but he was probably like 12 or something. And he taught us how to draw this ghost. And for me, this was perfect, because it took all the anxiety out of drawing, right? If I follow a few simple lines, I can reach a perfect drawing, and I never need to be insecure about art again. And then after a while, my mom taught me this one. My mom used to draw the transparent cube a lot on the phone. Again, I don't know how old you are, but phones used to be connected to the wall, and you couldn't really move, so you needed to do stuff while on the phone because it was really boring. You couldn't play Candy Crush or anything like that. So she drew a lot of these, and I thought, like, this is amazing, right? Transparent cube, it's like 2D graphics in a Post-it. But yeah, I learned it, and again, now I had two drawings that I was perfect at, and if I only drew this forever, I would always be perfect, like the greatest artist ever. The third one, everybody knows it, and this is even worse than the other two ones, because the S is literally just drawing lines, and if you draw them in the exact order without even thinking about it, you always get a perfect result. And then when I was around 4, I was like hero at my school because I was drawing at like a 16-year-old level, because I could do Goku smoking a joint, which I would see in all the bedrooms around. And I was really good at this one, and I was like, okay, cool. I'm really, really good. I can draw these 4, and I had more, but I'm not going to bring them up here. But finally, I achieved perfection, right? There's nothing else that I need to do as an artist. And my brother would draw these weird-looking buff dudes with like grills for hands, and they were all crooked and stuff. And I would look at it, and I was like, can't even draw, that's awful. Mine are way perfecter than yours. But if you have older brothers, you know that they are really, really good at hurting your feelings and kind of like bringing you down a notch. And that's what my brother did when he asked me point blank, why do you always draw the same thing? And I was like, he got me. Like, I never thought about it, right? I was like 5 or something. I was like, okay, I always draw the same thing. That's true. Like, why am I not perfect again, right? And then I looked at his drawing again, and I was like, he completely switched the tables, because now his drawing is perfect. He's like, this guy can draw whatever he wants, like, super creatively, and I can't. I can just draw those 3, 4 things, and I can't get out of that because I'm too afraid. And my brother could draw those and be proud of them and show them around. People were like, that's pretty cool. So for me, it was like an awakening, like, okay, I can't draw these things anymore. And actually, I stopped drawing for a while. As a kid, I was like, okay, I don't want to draw anymore. I'm not an artist. My brother is way better than me again. But like I told you, I was really bad at school, so I kept drawing eventually. And I just started drawing whatever I wanted. And I'm really lucky that my brother hurt my feelings as a kid, because those drawings, some of them kind of like turned to be like, I take the doodles and I turn them into other things, and those become pieces on my portfolio that got me the job where I am today. So I was really lucky about that. And then if we think about the industry a little bit, and this is a bit of a harder jump than the other lessons, so stick with me on this one. I was trying to find examples of how can I translate this to the industry, and the biggest one I can find is Nintendo. So in the 2000s, again, I'm telling my age a little bit, there was a PlayStation 2, and there was the Xbox, and there was the GameCube. I don't remember anybody that had GameCube, kind of like on my circle of friends. Everybody either had the PlayStation 2 or the Xbox, because they had like way better graphics, way better performance, the games were cooler, and they could play DVDs, which at the time was like a really, really big thing. And the GameCube couldn't. So again, Nintendo was stuck between these two things of like, okay, Do we go for performance and all these other things? Do we try to chase perfection, right? Like me as a kid. If we follow this formula, can we even be successful? Probably not, because the other consoles are doing it better. So they did something else, and they created the Wii. And I cannot explain to you at the time what the Wii was. It was basically the most successful console at the time, and it outsold the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox by a lot. By only having, like, even if they only had Wii Sports, I think they would outsold it. Like, this was like a Wii Sports machine. They found a whole new market because of it. You know, kids could play it, and you could see it on the news, and like old people were playing it in the elderly homes and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, this is crazy! Everybody can play." This was like the advent for casual games, basically on the mobile, right? Same thing. And Just Dance, the same thing. Like kids could play it, moms could play it, everybody could play it. So this outsold a lot of things, and that's the same idea of like instead of chasing what's there. The lesson for me, and that I try to impart to you, although I think a lot of people don't really have a choice to be super risky right now in our careers, it is to kind of like try to sidestep things once in a while and not do everything by the numbers, because that's, by taking risks, it's really where you actually find good ideas. And that's risky because when you try something completely new, you end up in a place where you don't know if everything's going to connect with your audience, right? The riskier you go, the harder it is to figure out, like, is anybody even going to understand what I'm trying to do, because I'm going completely bonkers here. And that's why I have my third lesson, which is find your shorthand. And this is a little bit more abstract than the other, so bear with me again. So how I try to explain to people is we have Mickey Mouse, and Mickey Mouse is a rat, but it's not like a rat, right? It's not like that. Because our brain has been taught by, like, Disney and people around us and just like the world, that this shape kind of is a rat or a mouse or whatever you want to call it. But that's how it works. This is shorthand for a rat. And I think it's easier to understand if you think about like letters and alphabet and language and stuff like this, because everybody around you, especially like in your country, it's taught to you, you get to understand it. It's like a shared common language that you all have. It's not the same thing for music, movies, games, whatever. Of course, there's a shared language between all of these, but it's not taught to you by the government, right? It's not like something that you need to be really successful. I mean, you should, but it's not something that is taught to you. It's something that maybe your parents teach you about a little bit. Maybe your dad likes rock or something, and it teaches you a little bit about rock. Maybe your uncle or cousin knows a little bit about hip-hop, and it teaches you this stuff. And then you're able to have conversations. You're able to kind of like dabble in those mediums by having the shorthand that everybody else has that's a fan of those things. And you're like, ah, cool, I can talk. But if you don't know anything, you can kind of superficially enjoy this stuff, but you can't really go deep in it. And I feel it's the same thing with games. But before games, a little bit more about illustration and how I learned this lesson. I, for a long time, was an illustrator, and I had a lot of teachers. And I had this guy. He was a children's book illustrator, and he would do these pieces that were like super complex, at least in my mind, like from an artist's point of view. He was drawing like gardens and cities and like these little things. And I was like, this guy can draw this stuff with the least amount of effort possible. Like with just a few lines, he can give us an idea. Like he found that shorthand, right? Like he was able to find exactly what he knew would be the least amount of work possible to put an idea in our mind. And he was my teacher for a while, and I asked him, like, how do you get to that? Like, how do you figure that out? Because I couldn't make that translation of like, how do I get a really complex idea into like a super simple idea? And he told me about his dad. His dad used to do Matchbox, like for cigarettes. It's something that was really big in the 60s. And he had to draw these things like in this size, right? And then because he didn't have enough money, he, on the side, would print these on posters that were really, really big. And people would buy them, and it would work. And the lesson that he taught me was, if it works on like a Matchbox, a drawing, it will work on a really big poster. Even if you put details and stuff, it's still gonna work. And that's how he kind of found like his shorthand of like, if you make it really, really small, you don't have a lot of room to spare, so you have to be really, really efficient. And again, with games, I think this translates also. If we think about Pong, which is like 2 pedals, 1 ball, and not enough pixels, right? If you take that and move it into the 90s, you can make like a beach frisbee game. You can add more details, you can add more resolution, more pixels, everything. But the essential idea is still there, right? The shorthand, it's still Pong. You understand the game design, you understand the game, you know exactly what to do. Again, if you think of the Wii Sports, same thing. Tennis, simulation, there's like motion controllers and stuff like this, but the idea is still the same. It's just Pong with more stuff around it, but it will always connect with an audience because everybody kind of knows Pong by now, especially if you play games. It's a shorthand that all of us know of. And an exercise that I do with a lot of my students for art, especially for games, is how to find your shorthand in game art, especially mobile art, right? Because it needs to be really small. And I tell them, like, just find a really high-res picture and try to make it with the least amount of pixels possible, right? You take a duck, and you need to do the shape of a duck with the least amount of pixels possible. You need to have the billing, the eyes, the wings, the shape. And that works. It really trains you to kind of see things in a different perspective. And I think you can do the same for games, which I do a lot with game designers, which is take your AAA game, whatever your crazy idea is that you're doing in Unreal and Unity, whatever, and turn it into an 8-bit game. You don't actually need to do the game, because that takes way more effort than the duck. But if you can condense that 8-bit game into a sentence, a word, whatever, an essence, then you will know that that game at least is going to connect with your audience. This doesn't mean that it's going to be successful, but at least your audience will know what's happening. They will know what the game is about. So I take a few of them and make an example so it's easier. Breath of the Wild, if you think about it, this one is easier because there was actually a pixel version of it, right? So you can kind of all see where I'm going. But I think the main idea, the main essence, if you can condense it into a word, is exploration. And we all know what it is because Miyamoto said so. But there's others like Metal Gear Solid, the same thing. There were still also pixel games for this one. And I think in one word, you can say stealth. And these are things that you can test with your audience, right? You can ask them, like, how do they feel about the game? Describe it in a few words and whatever. And if they're actually describing the words that you are thinking of before you're creating the actual game, you know that they'll connect. Again, doesn't mean that it will be successful, but it's way easier to be successful when you connect with an audience than the other way around, of like the audience doesn't even know what they're doing and try to make a game successful like that. And then the last example I have, it's Rocket League. And of course, the essence is still Pong, but with cars. It's still the same game, like I said. Still the same essence, same idea, same shorthand that everybody knows and can play along. So I think these are the 3 lessons, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, there we go. The 3 lessons that I learned from doodling that I'm trying to pass on to people. Make time for mindless creativity, perfection is overrated, and find your shorthand. And I think if you have those, you'll have a better time working in the industry. And then I actually have a 4th lesson that's kind of like a secret lesson that I didn't even tell the people, kind of like, although they did see my slides before, I think, which is more of a life lesson, which is fun happens on the margins. So I spent a lot of time not actually drawing on my notebook that I have just for drawing. I spent a lot of time in meetings and, like I said, busy person. And most of my doodles happen on the margins of these notebooks where I have actually really serious information on the middle, right? Like about Candy Crush, monetization, features, like art managing, one-on-ones, all this type of stuff. And when I look back at it, I don't connect with the words at all. I connect with the little things there because they're fun. That's what I remember when I was playing on all these, when I was working on all these studios, is like, oh, I had a lot of fun when I was in meetings and stuff, and I could translate that into a job, which is nice. And I think it's the same for life. We all join games to have fun, to connect with others, I feel, even if it's online, mostly nowadays. We all join the industry. Some of us join for the money, I know. But most of us, I think, join the industry to kind of have fun, create fun experiences, connect with players, see if our idea can connect with others, and find that world, that community. And it's the same with companies. In the margins of the company is where you're going to find all these people, all these friends that are going to spend more time with you than your family because you're going to spend a lot of time working with these people side by side, mostly than you're at home. And these people are going to be the ones that teach you about games, the ones that give you feedback about life. If you move to another country like I did, these are going to be your support group for everything that you do. So my last lesson would be don't neglect the margins of your life, especially while working in this industry, and remember to have fun. And that's it. Thank you.